Welcome, everybody. Today we have one of our exceptional thought leader shows, and I'm so glad to have Dr. Warren Farrell with us. He is truly a remarkable spiritual and thought leader. He has written 8 books, and his books are translated into many languages and are sold all over the world. I have read some of them, not all of them, but I can tell you that he does research in areas that no one else looks at. He's written a book called The Boy Crisis. We're going to talk about that today. And another book, which is Women Cannot Hear What Men Don't Say. That happens to be my personal favorite. He has also been on Forbes, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, many television programs. I'm sure you're familiar with his name. He's an amazing brand, and we're so honored that he has donated his time to be with us today. I'm Lorraine Siegel. I am the founder, chair, and CEO of the Exceptional Women Awardees Foundation. It is a foundation that enables high-level women to reach their dreams. Why did I start this foundation? Well, I never had a mentor. Early in my career as a lawyer and then as a CEO of multiple companies, even as a board director, I never had a guide, but I wanted to be sure that women who walked the road less traveled as I had would always have a network of supportive women leaders who would enable them to reach their dreams. That's exactly what EWA, the Exceptional Women Awardees Foundation, does. And so it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today our thought leader, Dr. Warren Farrell. Warren, welcome.
I'm so glad to be with you. It's been wonderful knowing you for 20 years.
Yes, I know. We have been friends for a long time and we've all gone white and gray together. But it's all right. We're still as energetic as we always were, and we're wiser too, Warren. So, a lot of the audience who are watching today, many of them are women, and many of them actually are part of our EWA, may be saying, why is Lorraine doing a program which is really supposed to be supporting women when you're bringing on somebody who's going to talk about how we should support men and boys? Well, many women feel that society is structured to benefit men as well. We don't need to support them. What say you about that, Warren?
Well, first of all, we're all in the same family boat. When only one sex wins, both sexes lose. Second, I often have women come to me who are executives and who say, I feel sort of disappointed and sometimes angry that, a man can be a have-it-all man, but I can't be a have-it-all woman. And I say, let's think about that. Men are have-it-all men when they oftentimes choose to, when they raise the money, and they often have women raise the children. But we have the new thing that we need to do to make an evolutionary shift in society is to expect and talk to women about, if your goal is to be highly successful and also have a family of well-raised children, one of the things that you can do is to look for a man who is more of a nurturer connector type of man rather than a provider protector man. But women who are successful oftentimes only look at men who are going to be about as successful or more successful than they do. And so then you have 2 successful people trying to raise children, often with a nanny. But the best raised children are children raised by parents with both parents very much involved. One of the wonderful things about women is when they have children, even though they're very involved in the workplace, they very rarely neglect their children, and they don't get too carried away with it. So if a woman wants to be a have-it-all woman, succeed at work, I ask you to look out for a man who is a nurturer, connector type of man, who you will make it clear to him that you will respect him enormously if he is the primary child raiser. And then you will have you'll have a clear path to going as high as you wish to go on the corporate ladder. And if his goals are toward raising children and feeling connected that way, and he feels respected by you for doing so. If he doesn't feel respected by you for doing so, the marriage will fall apart. If he feels respected by you for doing so, the marriage will be likely to be very much held together, especially if he's a man that you've chosen for his nurturing qualities.
Yeah, interesting. And of course, I'm not that example because my husband and I both have very successful careers, or we have had, and we raised one child. I think having one child maybe made it a lot easier. But I do want to go back to one of our, first of all, thank you for the prescription, because I think that for many very successful women, that indeed is what happens, and they are very successful because they have a partner who is able to support them in the child rearing role. But I want to go back to some of your research, Warren, and that is that you have said that you've diagnosed actually that there's mental, physical, economic, and education negative impacts on boys and young men that is now happening. Why is that happening?
It's amazing. I mean, all over the world, in all 56 of the largest developed nations, boys are falling behind girls on every single academic subject, but especially in reading and writing, which are the two biggest predictors of success or failure. They're falling behind girls in terms of mental health. So, for example, when boys and girls are 9 years of age, they rarely commit suicide. And when they do, they commit it at an equal level. But between the ages of 10 and 14, boys commit suicide twice as often as girls. Between the ages of 15 and 19, they commit suicide 4 times as often as girls. And between the ages of 20 and 25, about 5 times as often as girls. And so, we don't train our guidance counselors to have an inventory that I've created when I wrote The Boy Crisis of the 63 red flags that help prepare your school or your parents for boys that are getting cycling into depression and so on. So that's just in the mental health area, and that's just a little tidbit of it. The boys' sperm counts have gone down 60% in the last 30 years. Their IQs have gone down 15%. The life expectancy of males and females have always expanded with each generation and with each year, and except during periods of war. Without there being a period of war, male life expectancy has gone down 3 years in a row. Females not so, fortunately. And so these are just the physical health areas. Boys are much more likely to be obese. They're in the mental and physical health areas combined. They're much more likely to be addicted to drugs, to alcohol, to die from opioid overdoses. And in the education area, that's the one area we do know a little bit about, that the average person knows a bit about. We now know that girls are about 60% of the people likely to attend college, but almost nobody knows that boys, when they do get admitted to college, are far more likely to drop out. So that in the next couple of years, the predictable rate of graduating from college will be 2 females for 1 male. Now, the disaster in that is that there are very few women who are prospective parents, prospective moms, who go searching for a prospective father in an unemployment line or among boys who are living in their parents' basement, who have dropped out of high school and are not succeeding.
Warren, this is so horrific. I mean, this data, and I know that it's research-based data. This is not opinion. I know you well enough as a scientist to know that you did the research to make this data available. Are you saying that this is because of boys that are being raised in a non-dad enriched home, as opposed to boys who are raised in a dad enriched home? And I want to show a little clip here, because I saw this clip and I found it quite shocking. So let's just put up the first clip and then we'll talk about it.
When you have less father involvement, what happens is that the boy ends up, and a girl, by the way, ends up having less likelihood of being empathetic, assertive, being much more likely to do badly in every single grade area in school, being more likely to be suicidal, homicidal, to shoot up schools, and being more likely to be in prison.
Wow, that's scary stuff, Warren. And I just want to say to our audience, please put in your comments on LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to ask you questions too if we can get to them. Okay, Warren, over to you. Why is this happening? And what can we do to fix it?
First of all, when I submitted the boy crisis to my publisher, I outlined 10 causes of the boy crisis. And then, as you mentioned, I'm a real careful researcher. And so I started researching all the 10 causes, and I kept realizing that dad deprivation was by far the most important. So, for example, if a child, girl or boy, grows up with both a mom and dad, and they go to a school that has very few male teachers, it's not a big impact. It's a little bit of a negative impact versus the school that has some male elementary school teachers. But if a girl or boy grows up in a family where there's only a mom, and especially if the boy goes from a mom only being raised only by a mom to a school in which he has no male role models either, he's much more likely to be seduced by the invitation of a gang, to have him have a sense of family and to have a strong sort of role model of instead of being authoritative, being authoritarian in this case. Even Hitler Youth looked out for boys that did not have fathers. This has been a major problem, actually, that has been recognized for decades. And so the question that really intrigued me is, well, why? What do fathers do that's different from what moms do? That the children who do the best are children that have what I call checks and balance parenting. They have both the mom style parenting and the dad style parenting, both in their life, and the mom and dad is dialoguing about what to do for the boy versus the girl. So, for example, I mentioned there that children who are raised with significant father involvement, or what I call dad-enriched children, are far more likely to be empathetic and know the difference between being assertive versus aggressive. So, for example, when a dad raises a child, he's far more likely to roughhouse with the child. So he'll say, all right, kids, let's say he has 3 kids, all of you go on, and he'll toss them on the couch and say, your job is to jump on my back and try to pin me down before I pin the 3 of you down together, okay? All right, Daddy Ray. And meantime, mom's looking on and going, oh my God, I feel like I have only one more child to monitor. But I don't want to be controlling, and the kids seem like they're having fun, but I instinctively feel that sooner or later somebody's going to get hurt. Well, the mom turns out to only be about 99% likely to be right. And so but the father, nevertheless, is interacting with the kids and having lots of fun. And sooner or later, somebody does get hurt usually. And mom goes, all right, maybe now dad is learning. But dad says, what you can't do is, Jimmy, is to stick your elbow in Jane's eye like that. That's not okay. All right, Dad, I won't do that anymore. But then they go back to doing the roughhousing, and mom is going, wait a minute, you haven't learned your lesson not to do the roughhousing? Go back to doing the roughhousing. Sure enough, it happens again. Now dad usually says some version of, okay, I warned you, no more roughhousing until a couple of days from now. And mom is going, you're going to reschedule the roughhousing? And dad, but a couple of days from now when they do the roughhousing and dad says, you can't push so aggressively, the children now know that they're going to lose the roughhousing and all that joy and fun if they do that. So they end up usually being much more likely to not do that. And so what's happening there is a number of things. First of all, is dad is enforcing boundaries. From that boundary enforcement, the kids learn that if I want to have what I really want to have, which is the fun of roughhousing, then I have to postpone my gratification of pushing my sister or brother out of the way in order to win the roughhousing. I have to do certain things that are required for the rules in order to get what I want to have long term. So they're learning postponed gratification. As most people know, postponed gratification is the single biggest predictor of success or failure. When kids don't have that, especially boys, they tend to go into school and they tend to do badly on in schoolwork because they are easily distracted by an invitation, let's say, to play a new video game. And so then they don't do as well in school. They don't have the respect of teachers. Then they don't do as well in whatever gift they have in sports or in music because they don't have the discipline to become at the top of their field. So whatever dream they have, those dreams tend to be lead to failure. And after a while, the boy and the girl child, but especially the boy child, become afraid to dream. And so this oftentimes leads to video game addiction, addiction of drugs and alcohol, and disconnection from parents and saying, I just want to play my video games because all my friends are on video games. That can lead to increased failure, leading to increased depression, and that makes them vulnerable to suicide, as well as indirect causes of suicide, such as overdosing on opioids and so on.
Yeah. So, Warren, we live in a society where, thank heavens, so many different lifestyles and different combination families are accepted now. So having two women who are both mothers without a father, using a sperm donor and the eggs of one of the women, having two men using an egg donor and the sperm of one of the man for one child and the sperm of one of the other men for the other child, and surrogates to bear the child. It's a whole different world. How does what you say apply to those families?
Well, we don't completely know that yet, because the research is either usually done by people who are very much in favor of that type of family and tends to be biased in that direction, or people who are very much opposed to that type of family and has biases in that direction. However, there's whenever people select, when they're motivated enough to break the rules of society, they usually are a self-selected group. So, for example, 50 years ago, the female doctor was much more of a self-selected group. I don't know this, but my guess is probably the average female doctor, being self-selected, did exceptionally well, probably better than her male counterpart, because it wasn't something that was expected. She had to fight the norms. So that's the probable good news. But the possible bad news is that the dads and moms tend to have different, what I call dad-style parenting and mom-style parenting. Now, if you have two females raising a child, oftentimes two women they're attracted to a different type of woman. The one is more attracted to more of a male type of female, and the other more of a feminine type of female. And so you may have male and female energy in the raising of that child as well. But as a rule, among heterosexual couples, the moms tend to be more focused on protecting the child and giving the child permission to do things that the child really says she or he wants to do. Dads tend to be more focused on boundary enforcement and letting the children take risks. So when you have checks and balance parenting, the kids tend to get the best of both worlds. So, for example, a child will often say to dad, can I climb the tree in the backyard? And the dad will say, well, okay, but be careful. If the child asks mom, can I climb the tree in the backyard? The mom is more likely to say, well, sweetie, maybe in a few years you can, but right now you're too young and it's going to be dangerous. And so checks and balance parenting might involve a dialogue between the mom and the dad. The dad might say something like, when children climb the trees, their synapses tend to be more rejuvenated and connected, and they tend to actually increase their IQ as well as their social motor functioning. And so most dads don't know this, and moms can't hear what dads don't say. So dads have to take responsibility to do the reading. But what I found out is that parent magazines and parent books on parenting didn't tell dads that when a child climbs a tree, they're more likely to develop more intelligence, or 100 other things that are the positive impact of dad parenting. But once dads know this, they can communicate that with moms in a loving way, and moms can communicate their fears with dads. And so they might negotiate a sort of a middle ground, like saying, yes, the child can climb the tree, but not past a certain point and not on these very thin branches. And dad, you've got to be out there under the tree so that in case something does happen, you can cushion the child's fall. And so you don't get over-connected and preoccupied with your cell phone. Give me your cell phone. You can get out under the tree, and Jimmy or Jane can climb the tree for a bit. And so that's an example of that checks and balance parenting.
It's a good example. And I know, Warren, you've done some couples counseling for our EWAs. We have a couple of questions, and I'm encouraging our audience to put them in. So if we can get that one up, there was a question that came in from Lauren Howard. With boys growing up today, how is their self-confidence impacted by the shifting empowerment and focus on girls and women? And how can parents solve for this? Lauren, thank you so much. It's a great question. Warren?
Yes, it's a really important question. So first of all, it's the most important single thing you can do for your family is have family dinner nights. in which, and because this show is too short for me to elaborate on that, in one of the appendixes for the boy crisis, there's a whole outline as to how to structure a family dinner night so it doesn't become a family dinner nightmare. So the family dinner night then sets up the ability of everyone to know how to listen to each other and to make that family dinner night so exciting that the children don't even want electronics at the dinner table, because they're really looking forward to that one night a week where there's a family dinner night. And so once you have that, and everyone is listening to what everyone needs. I'm sorry, I just lost that question. What was the question again, Lorraine?
It's up on the screen, and it says, how can parents solve for the shifting empowerment on girls?
Yes. And so your boy is more likely to come home and say something like, at school we learn that, the future is female, or that, men are, when is beginning to get to be 13 or 14, that boys tend to be oppressors, and they tend to be the date rapists, and they tend to be the sexual harassers. And he's hearing all these, that men are the oppressors and women are the oppressed. Well, encourage him to bring these discussions home. Because if your son is having an undiscussed hearing on the part of teachers that boys are just, that the future is female, that doesn't really encourage him for his future. If he's feeling like he's an oppressor, he's part of the patriarchy. He's beginning to feel sexual feelings, but he's afraid that if he takes the sexual initiative, he'll be seen as a date rapist or a sexual harasser. But on the other hand, he notices that if he doesn't initiate much at all, the women are unlikely to initiate with him. And he's called a wimp. So he's caught between being sexual harasser and a wimp. These are discussions that need to take place at the family dinner table. But children are but if the parents don't know how to listen, they only know how to lecture, or they interrupt right away, the children will tend to bring them to other women or other guys that will not give them insights that will help them develop their self-confidence and realize that any question that they have can be discussed in the safety of the family, rather than among the lectures of the parents.
Yeah, that's so important. Obviously, you try as a parent not to argue with your spouse or your significant other in front of the children, but sometimes it just happens. You have a little bit of science on that, Warren. How do you deal with that?
Yes, the most important thing is to learn, if your children never see their parents arguing, when they get married and they get into their arguments, they will feel that this is something fundamentally terribly wrong, and they'll have great fears. On the other hand, if the children see parents arguing and just, and that ends up with physically hitting each other, or the anger is so great that no one talks to anybody for the next day or two, that's a bad role model as well. The reason I started doing one of the things that I was so excited about doing the couples communication classes that I did with your group is because I started to see, for example, that the boy crisis often emanated from families where there were divorces. Divorces often emanated from families where neither parent knew how to handle personal criticism without becoming defensive. And that's not true only of parents. That's true of all human beings. The Achilles heel of all human beings is our inability to handle personal criticism from a loved one without becoming defensive. So I realized that was biologically natural. Historically speaking, if you heard criticism, it was potentially from an enemy. And in order to survive, you had to get up your defenses or kill the enemy before the enemy killed you. But that what was functional for survival was dysfunctional for love. And so what I started working on with the couples communication classes was teaching people how to be able to, before they heard criticism, meditate into a place where they were saying, if I provide a safe environment for my partner's criticisms and feelings, no matter what they say and how they say it, my wife or husband will feel safer with me, therefore more loved by me, and therefore more love for me. And after I have each parent go through 6 or 7 mindsets like that for about a half hour's worth of time, they're able to hear their partner's criticism in a way that allows them to see that the more my partner gets upset and I still provide that safe environment, the more my partner will feel loved, protected by me, and therefore secure with me, and therefore more loving, more will love me more. And that is the beginning of the process that will allow your children to see you solving problems that way, rather than beating each other up, either verbally, physically, or depriving the other partner of loving contact,
You
and
know, Warren,
thousands of ways that it can be done.
I know this works because we had you come and we had 8 of our EWA couples here for a weekend with you and your lovely wife, and we've been married 53 years, so you helped us too. It was remarkable. I do want to talk about Hollywood and bribes, because that's something which you mentioned in your book. How does Hollywood how does Hollywood affect our young people, and all of us, in fact? And what do you mean by bribes?
Yes, it's what I call social bribes. And so Hollywood, like almost all aspects of society, historically speaking, has said to men basically, every generation had its war. And in every generation's war, you'd hear either Hollywood or Uncle Sam saying, "Uncles, the male is a hero if he goes into an area that's bombed and is still being bombed and drags out children and women especially, and maybe men, to be able to save their life." And then he gets maybe a Medal of Honor, and he's awarded a special award by the local VFW. And he's really, and he's looked at as a hero in the community, and his wife looks at him as a hero. Or he's killed, and a picture of him goes up on the mantle, and everybody admires him and says he was such a wonderful man. And the boy looks at the father, who's maybe passed away or dead, and sees that even though he's being criticized when he's younger, this next war that's coming up, his generation's war, if he goes to that and he becomes a Marine, and even if he's killed, he will be looked at always as a hero. And that's a social bribe to be disposable, and to be disposable, to be able to save others at the expense of himself. Now, if it's not a time of war, or if he's come out of war, he's also learns another social bribe historically, which is that he could be a hero by being a sole breadwinner. And the higher he goes on the corporate ladder, or the sole breadwinner ladder by earning more money, the better home he'll be able to buy for his family, the better school district the children will be able to go to, the more his wife will appreciate him. And so that he feels like he is, that's a social bribe to be the primary breadwinner, or to earn and raise money.
But that's different, completely changed today now.
It's changed, but not completely changed. So here's what's changed, I think, and here's what hasn't. Obviously, women are handling a much higher percentage of the economic burdens than they used to handle. But when we ask women who are they interested in marrying, and we watch the behavior of women who marry, it's still women tend to marry men who earn as much as they do or more, or who are like going to med school or law school and have the potential for earning as much or more. And here's where the boy crisis comes in. Boys today, half as likely to graduate from college in the next few years as the female counterpart is. The female counterpart who's graduated from college will often be looking for a male college graduate, but the male college graduates will be much more scarce. And she's not looking for a boy that's living in her family's basement. And boys are 66% more likely to live in their the parents' basement after graduation than their sister is. And so we're running into a real problem of the same thing even on the signifiers of potential for money. 72% of females want a man to pay for a woman on the first date and on dates. 82% of males agree with that. And so both females and males are still giving signals to each other that male money counts. You still never see an ugly woman get out of a brand new Porsche. And Hollywood is reinforcing all of that. They're making many more female heroes, but oftentimes the male heroes will be failures unless they not only save the female hero, mentor the female hero, and then are often criticized for not doing that. And I do a whole series of.
Oh, Warren, we've got so many questions. I want to try and get a couple of them in. So let's just put up anyone that the producer has ready to go. Here comes one from Catherine Harrison. Thanks, Catherine. For those who've not yet chosen a life partner, what should they look out for to indicate a partner who will remain involved over time and choose to fill a dad-enriched role for his children 5, 10, 20 years down the road?
Really important question. First of all, we know now from Gottman's research and others that there's a lot of truth to the phrase, a happy wife equals a happy life. So it's so important that women use not veto power, which is what women have been trained to use, wait for a man to come up to her and then respond either positively or negatively. That's veto power. But that women use original choice power, that they walk into a party because when a woman chooses a man from her instincts of here's vibrations that I really want, here's a type of, is he a man at the party who doesn't just talk about himself or doesn't just talk about me and reveal nothing about himself, but does he have a balanced sense of emotional intelligence? Is he somebody that expresses an interest in children and raising children? Let me ask questions about that. If he doesn't ask me out, let me get the phone number and ask him out. In fact,
I love that, Warren. I think that's great. And most of our women would probably do that because you're talking about proactive women leaders. I want to cut you short because we have a couple of other questions.
Absolutely.
I also want to promote something called Charity Buzz, charitybuzz.com. If you go onto that wonderful site, you will find that Warren has donated an hour of his time to anybody who bids the highest, and the proceeds will go to our foundation. So charitybuzz.com. Go on there. Let's put up Kimberly Reese. Thank you so much. What would you say the most important things women can do as mothers, leaders, and wives to begin to influence this crisis in a positive direction? Warren, what do you think?
Yes. Focus on the chapter in the boy crisis about what moms and dads do differently that lead to children being, as a result of both parents parenting, much more likely to be empathetic, to understand the differences between being assertive versus aggressive, to have that postponed gratification, to not get ADHD. Those are really because very few men articulate this, even know about what they contribute. They just contribute in the way they contribute. So really study that part of the boy crisis book, and then begin to make sure that I'm going to spend a minute here addressing moms who are the only parent. Make sure that you go out and get your son involved in, first of all, make sure you understand those differences so you can explain to the father that he is needed by you. When men feel needed, they respond to feeling needed. But they have to know specifically from you that you've learned what their value is and that your children need them. Men change very quickly when they get that message. If that's impossible for whatever reason, the man's in prison, he's dead or whatever, then make sure you reach out to get your son involved in Cub Scouts, in Boy Scouts, in 3 types of sports, what I call in the Boy Crisis book, the liberal arts of sports, in pickup team sports, in organized team sports, and in sports that require a lot of self-motivation like gymnastics and so on. Each of those develop different parts of your child's personality. Make sure your child is involved in a faith-based community, even if you don't believe in God. Find a faith-based leader who gets boys about your son's age together with other boys and has them each talk about their vulnerabilities and their feelings in a confidential way. All boys harbor deep insecurities inside of themselves that they don't allow other people to see until they see that every other boy has those same insecurities. Those are just a few of the many things that a single mom can do.
That's wonderful. And we are going to go a little over what the show was originally scheduled, because Warren has so much to tell us. Warren, although there are two subjects that we never ever talk about at EWA, and one is politics, the other is religion. The fact remains that of our close to 100 women leaders who are either Jewish or Christian or Muslim or other belief system, they do have strong moral codes. You talk about where there is no father or male presence. What about God the Father? Can you address that a little bit?
Yes. I spoke at a church in Bedford-Stuy some years ago, and the entire community in that church was African American. And then after I finished doing my presentation there, I went back, and the minister introduced me to 24 boys. 22 of those 24 boys had been in prison. And I asked them, what got them in prison, what got them out of prison, why they developed an interest in the church. And about of those 22 boys, 18 of them said to me, if it wasn't for my belief in God, I would be doing the same thing that I was doing that got me into prison. And it wasn't just the belief in God per se. It was the active role of that minister in taking each boy aside and making it clear what he saw in that boy that had value. In addition to having those boys in those groups of 8 talk with each other about the reason they felt they needed to steal money or sell drugs or do something else to get money or to get respect. And so all the boys sort of began to understand that their own vulnerabilities were not isolated to them being an inferior person, that almost all the boys shared that.
Yeah, amazing. There is a question that's come in. I didn't see the name, but it's about boys entering the workforce. So perhaps, Warren, you could talk a little bit about what would you do to encourage boys when they enter the workforce? And here we go, guidance for our business leaders to guide young boys or men who are entering the workforce. How can we support them given the male structural design of the legacy system?
Yes, first of all, just figure out with your son, work with your son, spend a lot of time with your son. And because boys, when you ask them, how's everything going? Initially, they will not respond very openly. It's only when you have a lot of hangout time, especially the father and the son, that the boy will begin to open up about his doubts and his fears. From that, begin to discover the core of his personality. He doesn't need to be a military man anymore, but on the other hand, he might want to be. Discover whether those things are things that he's saying because he thinks he'll impress other people, or because you've had that respect for that, or whether it's his core personality. Then make sure, once you discovered his core personality, that he understands that no matter what he wants to do, it'll take a lot of discipline to do that. And the discipline means him not just telling you about the dream that he has, but his having the discipline to fulfill that dream, to practice the basketball, the music, or go into a vocational school or go into college. Also discern between whether your son is more an academic type that's interested in maybe becoming a doctor or a lawyer, or whether he's more into vocational training. If he's into more something that would be helped by vocational training, don't discourage him from that. I had a father email me very recently saying, I'm so upset. This boy that I had also known growing up, he wants to become a plumber. And I just sent him the data on how much plumbers make and how he could start his own plumbing operation and so on. And he wrote back enormously relieved. Don't look down on boys who want to become working class boys, but get them the training, the vocational skills and so on, and encourage our schools to get the vocational training for our boys that we don't have much of in the United States compared to, say, Japan, where, by the way, 99.6% of the people who graduate from vocational programs in Japan, 99.6% of them get jobs.
Amazing, amazing. Warren, you run a couple of seminars. I think one is virtual and the rest are in person. And I know they get booked up very quickly, but if people email you, I hope you'll be able to give them the details. And there, your email just came up on the screen today. I have one more question, which I want to ask you, and that is the book that I love the most, which is Women Can't Hear What Men Don't Say. It's all in the title. Just tell us what that title means and how you came about that research.
Yes. As I was mentioning before about there are not very many books on parenting and social skills that are directed toward males. And so males, when they do their style of parenting, for example, they don't know that it's much more likely to lead to their children being more empathetic. And they certainly are highly unlikely to say something like, one of the reasons I want to roughhouse with the kids, aside from them having fun, is that the way I will roughhouse with them will increase their empathy. That is, by requiring them to think of their sisters and brothers' feelings rather than sticking an elbow in their sisters or brothers' eyes in order to win at the roughhousing, that leads to our sons and daughters knowing the difference between being assertive and aggressive and knowing that somebody else's feelings count. If I don't put a boundary down and make them lose something like the roughhousing, if they don't pay attention to their sisters or brothers' feelings, the only person's feelings they'll be paying attention to are their own. Most fathers don't know that empathy is wonderful, but only empathizing with the child's needs teaches the child to think of his or her own needs. It's also important to require the child to think of parents' needs as well. But many loving, protective parents, the more loving they are, the less they tend to require the child to think of their needs as well. They think of giving and being empathy as being a great parent. The data does not show that. And so men, we need to educate ourselves about all the nuances of raising children that have not been introduced to us by any parenting magazine or book, and then we need to communicate them in a loving way to our wives or our women friends with whom we are raising our children.
So the reality is mom has needs and so does dad, and the children need to recognize that as well.
Yes, and
Warren,
the children.
I wish we had another 2 or 3 days with you, but fortunately you're a good friend and I know that you'll come back one day, and I strongly suggest people buy your books because there is so much more in there than we could cover today. I thank you for your time, for your brilliance and your research, and for everything that you're doing for EWA. Thank you so much.
Thank you for our 20 years of friendship, your great questions, and your wonderful listening.
Thank you. And so we are not done because we always have another show for you. And we do. We have another wonderful show where this time we're going to bring 2 of our EWAs, our Exceptional Women Awardees. We have Celia Ramos. Celia is a senior client partner and also the managing director at Accenture. And with her is Tamara Cora, who is vice president of finance at Quantcast. Both of these exceptional executives are extremely good in finance and very knowledgeable in the technology sector. That combination is unusual, and we're going to hear from them some of the opportunities and challenges that they have faced in their careers to get to where they are today. And also, I want to leave you with a question, which I always do. Do you have a boy or a man in your life who could be benefited by Warren Farrell's books or insights? And if so, please do use his email, which has come up on the screen many times today, and also go to Charity Buzz and bid for a whole hour with him, you and your partner potentially, or a child or a parent. And also remember that we have a wonderful podcast that is made from the show. You can listen to it again. There was a lot of data here. You can hear us on Apple, on Amazon Music, on Spotify, our YouTube channel. I hope you join us next week for our next show. And thank you so much. Have a great week, everyone.